Yes, the Suburban Boy, Dave Warner, one of the icons of Western Australia's music scene. He's an award-winning writer. He's helped write TV shows as well. He's also a great East Fremantle supporter, and we thought, just for a change of pace on the show this morning, we'd get Dave on the phone and talk to him about all matters football and life in Western Australia. Dave, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Duffo. How are you going, my man?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. Hey, tell me, I read in some of your biographical material that I crammed into my brain last night. You live in Sydney now, is that right?
Yes, yeah, I've been here for quite a few years now, since really 1987. I still get back and did get back for the East Fremantle Premiership year before last, which was, long overdue and certainly a good celebration.
Hey, one of my favourite memories was a Sunday session at the Bustle Motor Hotel in Bunbury in 1983. You were playing and absolutely rocking the place, and me and my mates had been to a wine tasting just before we got there. It's fair to say we got there in pretty ordinary nick, and we certainly enjoyed ourselves greatly. So you are one of my fondest memories. Tell us, how did you come to love the East Fremantle Sharks?
Oh, look, it was, I just grew up, and I think my dad was a butcher in Fremantle. We'd had a butcher shop for 50-odd years there, and I'd often stay on the weekends with my grandparents. My pop was a wharfie, drove the cranes down there, and my grandmother had for years worked in bars. Anyway, the thing was, I got to that age of about 7 or 8 or 9 where you decide that you should be following a football team, and I was on the floor of my grandparents' kitchen in Fremantle, and one of their friends came in and said, "Oh, who do you follow?" And I knew there was East and South Fremantle, so I went, "Oh, South Fremantle," and they, as one turned on me and said, "East Fremantle." And, all right. So that was literally how I came. I was told by my grandparents, and from that time on, Mark, I didn't waver. And I was very pleased I did for most of my life.
Absolutely. They've been a very successful club, and obviously the football scene in Fremantle, I think it's kind of like the cradle of football in Western Australia. Obviously, I'm a South Fremantle boy myself, but I love the extra edge there is on football down in Fremantle. Can you remember your first game going to watch, it would have been Old East back in those days, I'd imagine, going to watch them play?
I can, and in fact, I wrote a poem called My First Game of Football, but very sadly, the first game I went to was East Fremantle playing Claremont at East Fremantle Oval. I finally pestered my dad, and he took me along to a game, even though he wasn't into footy. And I think East Fremantle were about second on the ladder, and Claremont had won one game, I think, through the year, coached by Peter Pianto. And Claremont beat East Fremantle by 5 points with John McIntosh going wild in the ruck, and Ray Sorrell having a running shot for goal, with seconds to go, and I think he hit the post. He kicked a point anyway, but a narrow miss. So that was my first game, and fortunately I butted up after that. And in those days, Mark, because my grandparents, as I say, they lived down in Fillmore Street there in the flat. So if South Fremantle was playing at home, I'd go with my grandfather and watch South play, and then the next week we'd catch the bus up to East Fremantle and watch East Freo play. So it was good, it was always a week here and a week there, home or away, and so you could see both Fremantle sides or a Fremantle side every week.
Who was your favourite player, Dave?
Going back to the time when I was a youngster, I'd like Darryl Cormack on the wing when I was, first playing, and then Fred Lewis, I think, through the next generation, and then Doug Green and Brian Peake, and Tony Bahaja probably in the latter years, if you want to call it that, through the 70s. But early on, and Norm Rogers was pretty good too, and the stories of Norm Rogers before the game in the derby, just battering his head into the brick wall of the change room, firing himself up. So they were all my favourites. I did like Mike Regan too. He was a bit of a bad boy.
He was a bad boy, Mike. He was a policeman brother, and Mike was probably maybe slightly the other side of the tracks. It was funny. I knew you'd say Fred Lewis. I don't know why. I just knew you would say Fred Lewis. And before I'd picked a team, before I'd picked South Fremantle, Fred Lewis was one of my favourite players as a little tacker as well. Your favourite premiership? Which of the ones that they won in your time do you remember most fondly?
Oh, it has to be 1979. My friends and I longed for a Derby grand final, and we hadn't seen one in all the years we'd been following footy, and then we finally got that 1979 grand final, which was the record crowd. It may well have ended up still being the record crowd at Subiaco Oval by the time Subi closed. I'm not sure, but
it certainly did. Yep, it was. Yep.
Yeah, it was a wonderful day, and the fact that East Fremantle came from fourth and had a hard win over East Perth to get through, and the great Mick Cronin died in that first semi-final, well, in the commentary box, I think. It's the end of the game. And then I think we knocked off Claremont in the preliminary final and got to play South and came through. So that was my favourite one for sure.
Have you graduated onto supporting an AFL team with any passion, Dave, or do you prefer to stick with yourselves as a Sharks man?
Oh, look, I follow the Sydney Swans, and have done for, I think, since about 1990. Dick Collis, who was a bit of a mate of mine and for a long time was the head of the Swans when he first came over and took over the reins of the Swans. He said basically to everybody that he could, look, if you don't start following the Swans, we may not have a team here. So all my friends and I, we all had various allegiances to either originally VFL teams or whatever. So I follow the Swans. I'm a big fan of those. I always, of course, have a soft spot for Fremantle. But, the passion is never the same as what has been generated from when you're 6 years old. So East Fremantle is always, number one. But I do follow the Swans and, of course, went to the grand final, was devastated last year with the once more atrocious effort from the Swans on the big day. And no excuses, unfortunately.
Yeah, interesting, the handover of coaches as well. How do you think Dean Cox will go as coach of Sydney?
I don't know. I really have no idea. I know a lot of people seem to have this idea that Coxie might toughen the Swans up or something, but I don't know. I mean, he was there through the last couple of losses, so it's hard to know how much, whether, did he have a voice that wasn't being heard or anything. The weird thing is the Swans still, I think, won more games than anyone last year. They won a lot of good games, but they did have a couple of really bad losses, and they've obviously got a couple of structural problems in the team. Bit of weak in defence, no really big, strong defensive unit. Some bad trades, got rid of Alir for nothing, and let Nick Newman go for nothing, and then lost Jordan Dawson to Adelaide as well. So I think they're a little bit weak there, and unless they're dominant in the midfield, then that comes home to roost. So, I don't know. I'm not as gloomy as some people are, and I think the forwards are still pretty young. The bigger forwards are still pretty young there. Amarty's only played 50 games, and McDonald and McLean not many more, probably 60 or 70. So, a bit of chance for growth there. Yeah,
they're very young forward centre. There's no doubt about that. Do you like the game as it is, or do you prefer it as it was?
Look, I don't. Look, I just go with it in a way. There are a couple of things. I don't mind most of the newer rule changes and things. I think they have improved the game, but there are a few things that just really drive me nuts. One is that a blatant push in the back just isn't paid anymore. Guys are just shoved two hands in the back, and most of the bad concussions, I think, come from somebody being pushed in the back and then hitting an oncoming player or getting severe injury because of it. Shepherd missing a grand final because he was needlessly shoved in the back over the boundary line, not even a free kick given. So that sort of stuff drives me nuts. I think the last couple of years they've actually done pretty well in trying to get the game on and moving it on. So I don't mind some of the other rules and the 666 rules and all that stuff to try and make it work. It can be really exciting, and you're looking at top-notch athletes and so many great games. I still love the game regardless.
Dave, I reckon we can sit here and talk for about an hour and a half, but we've got to move on. We've got news coming up, and we've got to catch up, obviously, with the news out of Port Adelaide. Thanks so much for joining us on the show. We might try and talk to you again a little bit later on the season and get your thoughts on how things are progressing. But you bring back some fond memories for me, and you certainly have some fond memories yourself. So thanks so much for sharing them with us.
Yeah, love to talk anytime. Footy. Thanks, mate.
Dave Warner, the Suburban Boy, joining us on the show today. If you want to text in your own memories about Dave, 0487 736 736. That is the Harvey Norman Bustleton text line. The Barrett and Dode open line is 13 12 55, and we'll be back with more after the break.